the 9th annual John McKendy Memorial Lecture in Narrative. I'm Clive Baldwin, Director of the Centre for Interdisciplinary Research on Narrative, which is 10 years old this year. And before I invite Dr. Bill Randall to introduce our speaker, I just want to share with you for a few minutes the work of the Centre. The McKendy Lecture is but one of our activities, though perhaps the most public. Over the years, we've had many distinguished speakers covering many different topics, from spirituality to human trafficking to mental health to narratives of institutions. We've been fortunate to have hosted such speakers, and tonight's no exception. This year's been an active year for the Centre, 10 years old. We've welcomed 3 new members to the CERN team: Matt Robinson from English, Bill Calliscan from Sociology, and Anastasia Kadir from the Multicultural Centre in Fredericton. And apart from that, organising the McKendy Lecture, there are a number of things that I'd like to note this year. In April, CERN, the team, were the recipients of a New Brunswick Innovation Fund R3 Innovation in Ageing Award for our proposal to develop a Train the Trainer programme in narrative care. In this programme, we intend to develop and evaluate training materials and develop capacity in the use of narrative and storytelling and story listening to provide care for older adults. Using that funding, we're anticipating that we'll be in a position to employ a postdoc to lead the project, Michelle Gleason, a talented young scholar who 2 weeks ago successfully presented her PhD thesis on ethics, policy and long-term care. Between April and June, CERN was the site of a social work social action placement with 2 students working on a project in community narratives of resilience, a study of a rural community. Both students in the community reported enjoying the project and resulted in a number of presentations. An ongoing project funded by Springboard has been the development of a transmedia story on transableism, the desire to become disabled. The story is ready to be launched and consists of multiple media: video, text, computer game, graphic novel, artifacts, websites, Facebook pages, with which readers can interact and be part of the story, developing story. How readers choose to interact will shape the story they become part of. The project will be piloted in the near future, has been project managed by Brandy Estebert. Over the last year, we've employed a number of students on a variety of projects, with funding from the Summer Jobs Programme, the SEED Programme and the Stu Works Programme. These students have provided much needed support to the Centre's work, as well as providing projects as diverse as ageing, narrative and resilience, an archive of the work of Ivan Illich, spiritual identity among members of new religious movements and practitioners of alternative spiritualities, and transableism. In May, the team delivered an intercession course on the introduction to narrative theory and research. The course is cross-listed between English, sociology, psychology, gerontology and social work, which speaks both to the interest in and the influence of narrative in multiple disciplines. This year, we also have an interdisciplinary honours student working with us on spiritual identity of those who identify as other than human, those who identify as dragons, elves, vampires, werewolves, and the like. Under the supervision of Matt Robinson, Marcia Ingersoll and myself, Lauren Ripley will hopefully graduate in May. We're also currently working on a book project that's grown out of our 2 projects on ageing, resilience, and narrative. We had interest from the University of Toronto Press. We're particularly grateful to Tatlina Debley, Denise Resme and Jen Estey, who worked as research assistants on the project, and now that Denise and Jen are both members of the team, which is great because they do exactly the same hard work and we don't pay them. This year we've seen the retirement of Beth McKim, who's a founder member of CERN and has been instrumental in the success of the Centre and its activities, and also the success of Narrative Works, our online peer-reviewed open access journal. I want to take this opportunity to acknowledge her fundamental role in this. Narrative Works is now in its 7th year, and its success is due to hers and Bill's dedication, editing it off the corner of their desks. It attracts well-known scholars, as well as introduces new scholars to the world. In July, members of the CERN team presented at the International Narrative Matters Conference in the Netherlands, part of a symposium on narrative care. I'm also helping to plan Narrative Matters 2020 in Atlanta, Georgia. Finally, I want to thank Jeffrey Carlton and the staff in communications for the publicity materials and other help in organising this, and to Lauren Eagle, who's taken charge of all the arrangements for the speaker, the room, ensuring publicity materials got where they were meant to be, and a whole host of other tasks that left to me would not have got done. As I said, it's been an active and productive year. I want to offer my thanks to all of those who've been involved in the ongoing activities, and invite you to watch this space for what will come this year. Now I want to welcome Bill Randall to introduce our speaker for tonight. Bill.
Thank you very much, Clive. And for those of you who might have missed the first minute or so of Clive's remarks, that's Clive Baldwin, Canada Research Chair in Narrative Studies and our beloved Director of CERN, and who has a brilliant idea every 46 seconds. It's a delight to work with. It's my delight now to introduce our speaker for this evening, Dr. Marvin Westwood, who goes by the name Marv, and that's just an indication of just how easy a person he is to be around. He embodies the concept of narrative care, which we talked a lot about this afternoon when we had a wonderful discussion around the CERN table over in Mulroney Hall, and we'll hopefully have tomorrow between 10 and 2, and I actually would invite those of you who are able to come along tomorrow between 10 in the morning and 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Hopefully we'll have some coffee and so forth available for you, and you can continue the discussion with Marv and hopefully have a sense of the work that he's doing. He hopes to give a demonstration of what he'll be talking about and showing you a bit about this evening. In your bulletin, I call it bulletin, what do we call this? The program, sorry. That's bulletin reflects a previous career that I had. So I'll read some of what's in the bulletin because it's worth repeating. And saying again, in fact. Marvin Westwood, Professor Emeritus, so he's in that wonderful category of still being called a professor, but not having to do quite so much in the teaching front. Professor Emeritus of Counseling Psychology at the University of British Columbia. Prior to coming to UBC, or I guess going to UBC, because that's out there and we're here, he taught at a maritime institution, St. Francis Xavier University, so he kind of has a maritime connection, which is great, as well as teaching at McGill University. His major areas of teaching and research have focused on development, teaching, delivery of group-based approaches for counseling clients and programs for promoting men's psychological health. In 2005, he developed, and this is really important, the UBC Veterans Transition Program to help promote recovery from war-related stress injuries for which he received both the Queen's Golden and Diamond Jubilee medals. He was awarded the Royal Canadian Legion Professorship in 2012 when he established the UBC Centre for Group Counselling and Trauma. He's currently the senior advisor of that centre. About 3 or 4 years ago, I was driving from A to B on November the 11th, and I happened to turn on CBC radio for the afternoon program, and lo and behold, there was Marv's voice, and I recognized his voice because we've had great conversations over the years at various gerontology conferences. And he was talking with the program host, along with some of the other veterans who are part of the program, about the program that he's going to share with you this evening. And I was moved and touched, first of all, just to hear Marv's great voice and to know he's doing some very important things, but also to appreciate the national coverage that this wonderful program has been getting. So I think that will probably do for now. I noticed, by the way, Marv, in the brochure, you were wearing a striped shirt, okay? and you're wearing a striped shirt tonight, so that's wonderful continuity. Maybe it's the same shirt, I don't know. Anyway, let's give a warm CERN St. Thomas, New Brunswick welcome to our speaker, Marvin Westwood.
Sorry, okay there? You can hear? All right. All right. Well, thank you, Bill, and for the introduction. And being back in the Maritimes takes me back to St. Francis Xavier University, where it's my first job and got me going in a number of areas. And so it's a very familiar part of the country. And it's nice to be here and to see the quality of the work you're doing at the center here. It's really an outstanding Canadian institution. And globally, it's going to become more known, I think, because of our collaboration together. So this program that I am going to be showing you tonight is, as it's described, the Veterans Transition Program. We have our trauma repair. There's over 1,000 graduates now in the program across Canada, and the program is currently being delivered here in New Brunswick, not far from Fredericton, as we speak. It's the second one this year, and each province has these. So what you're going to learn tonight is the kind of program that these men and women, there are some women's programs too, there are fewer of them of course, but well, 200 people a year will go through this program. So let's begin. So the first off, why am I here talking about this is because it's the enacted narrative, meaning most of the veterans are men in the program, and as we know, traditionally socialized males don't really talk a lot. I think some of you might have males like that in your family. They're more comfortable doing things. So it's an enacted therapeutic approach after they tell their story. So you go to creating a group by storytelling, and it's called the guided autobiography, and then they enact their stories, and what's intriguing, it's the enacted narrative. And for many of the students that are here studying narrative methodology, the way to think about it is an enacted narrative, which is always in a group context, so there's member witnessing and impact feedback. So to be witnessed in your story and your life and what happened to you is often extremely valuable. Next, so what is guided autobiography? They refer to as life review. The CERN Center has developed strongly on this particular model, but it really means people have stories. Everyone has a story to tell, and the best story of all probably is our own, and it can be a painful story, and it can be a positive story. Stories cover the whole gamut, but everyone has a story, and so we make these stories possible to be delivered as part of a therapeutic recovery, and then if they enact the story, you'll see in the video, they achieve even more of their goals. So writing a life story from the thoughts, images, perceptions, and emotions of their major life events. With the military, they will choose to focus on the major events from their military experience, and they refer to it as baggage that they have picked up. So the course is referred to as dropping their baggage. They have another less clinically sound way of describing it. They call it unfucking their shit. So given that military culture, that's what they say this is. Now, university doesn't appreciate it in lectures when I say, oh, how's the program going? Are they dropping the baggage? Yes. And so we use that term. So as you know, that these client group is a very strong group. They people who've gone to the military are very disciplined, very well trained, and are not afraid of hard work at all. And so they like this kind of work because they work in a group, because they're trained and they fight, they protect in groups, and they're very used to the group approach. So it's soldiers helping soldiers. There's a definition of trauma, and today in our conversations, please remember that some of our workers and people in our society that deal with non-military senses, first responders, fire, police, and so on, they also have similar trauma injuries. And we don't talk about PTSD, we now refer to it as an operational stress injury. Operational stress injury is the official title now. Why? Is because being traumatized in the line of duty, whether you're a police officer or a veteran or an ambulance worker, is sometimes the exposure to what they see and what they do can injure their kind of sense of self And they need to have support as well as the Canadian military, in my opinion, so we're moving out to that area. So the workers of these people we take very seriously the concept of vicarious trauma. Trauma that you pick up when you're working in a palliative care unit, in civilian units, where you're dealing with a lot of distress. People need a resiliency program to accompany that. So at the end of a shift in the hospital, for instance, we would always arrange after a few days, if they're in intensive care, that we bring them together and offer support. Not quite like this, but we take this whole area quite seriously because these people are doing very, very important work. And so just remember that. Now, I'm not going to say too much more about this because I want to get into showing the actual thing, but for the people here, there's the approach here combines and builds on two group-based approaches, both guided autobiography, then leading to therapeutic enactment. So you know, I think most of you know, it's in the story area, that's just one component of human functioning. But in our system, this is a multi-systems approach. The therapeutic enactment integrates all of these domains. It crosses disciplines, if you like. So it has different modalities. Notice script theory, cognitive behavioral therapy, psychodynamic theory, and object relations, social learning, action theory, and group therapy. One of the things that you'll notice, there's an area referred to as psychodynamic. That includes the work of some of the psychodynamic theorists because they have a construct called soul. And there's people now looking at what's called a soul injury, and it's a more advanced kind of investigation because some injuries are way beyond the behavioral, physical, and emotional to a soul injury. And that's another topic which we are just engaged in and just came from a conference in Regina, the military conference where we addressed that. So I just would say the guided autobiography process, why it is a good way to start getting people to support one another, is it's a chance for them to write a story, talk about it, read it to somebody else, and have the others talk back and hear back from the listener how my story has touched them. And that helps them get a new narrative. It's called an unintegrated gestalt becomes more integrated. So if you put your story together, you end up with a more coherent story than an incoherent story, and that is more gratifying. So that TE process, which you're going to see in action shortly, is the bridge. It's enacting the narrative. So what we do there is we try to help in the TE enacted self is to regain parts of the self that are lost in trauma. And if you just think about injuries that veterans would have, frequently their injuries in Canada anyhow, is that they were in a situation and they're facing helplessness in face of unfixable suffering. Frequently it's the loss of a mate or of somebody serving with them that they couldn't save in a combat zone. And so they're left with this haunted sense that they should have done more. They should have been the one in the lab who dies, not me. Not my friend should have died, I should have gone for him. So they're troubled with this sense of an incomplete or unfinished story with their friends. Those are common examples. Sometimes it's children in Afghanistan that they got to know in the camps, and all of a sudden these children were taken away from them and they never saw them again. And it reminds them of their own children. Or the interpreters. They lost an interpreter who had saved their lives and they didn't get to honor and say those things. So these are the kind of issues that we often see. And I won't go into the themes right now. I'll move right into the program. The Veterans Transition Program, as you see it here, it's a 100-hour program. It's offered at a retreat center. I think the one going on now in New Brunswick is someplace just out of Fredericton, which is retreat-like. So I don't set these up. I oversee other things, but they will be altogether 6 to 8 veterans in a group with a professional team of 4 others, and they will work on, there's 3 phases, a 4-day with 2-week to 3-week month break in between, and another 4 days. They do intensive work and then a break for integration, and then the last phase is a 2-day program where they integrate all of their learning and set goals for the future that could include also changing maybe careers, and sometimes in some cases they may need to work with individuals after. But for the most part, after the 10-day program spread over 2.5 months, they would say that they basically have transitioned back to a more healthy lifestyle and personal development. So this is the way it looks in a nutshell. Here's the pre-program. They sometimes see professionals first. They get referred to the program, but not by therapists or psychologists or doctors as much as other graduates of the program. Most of the 60% of the 1,000 veterans through the program we've offered have come from other veterans who referred them. So other soldiers go through the program. They will say to their friends or their family members or people who have noticed that their family member is suffering from a post-traumatic stress injury, hey, why don't you take the program? So if a soldier recommends it and there's no clinical assessment required, they can just take the program because their life is struggling for them. We do not send reports to their chain of command, and it's confidential, so they do not have to report to their chain of command that they're going and seeking support and recovery. Whereas many veterans will shy away from going to the OSI office here or in St. John or whatever because they fear if they go and have an assessment, and that's where they might get a classification of a PTSD, that can result in their mind career suicide because they're no longer fit for service. And for these kind of men and women too, it's a kind of stigmatization for them. Many of them, not all, we're getting now to the point where people are saying, okay, I got an injury and I want to go. But for many of these other veterans, they will avoid going for help. With this program, they can come and just join up after they're screened. So phase one is there. They do the life review. We build the groups. They build a very cohesive group. You'll see in the video through storytelling. And in their stories, they don't talk about the horror stories. They talk about growing up as kids. They talk about some of their strengths, some of their great dreams they've had growing up, and that builds a solid group, and they do that through life review method. And then in phase two, they actually do the enactment. So if you look at this arrow, it's like the life review is self-disclosure, self-awareness, and they build a trust, a cohesive group, and then they do the enactment. So when this arrow represents the kind of emotional hard work, it's tough because it's intense, and they really have to go back and visit very difficult situations, but they go back as a group. So the arrow drops down, and then phase three, this is where they're processing their trauma, and you'll see in the video how we do it. And then they reintegrate the new experience and refocus and reconnect. So if they've said in the typical stress injury, might be they couldn't save one of their mates in a firefight, and they were responsible for them. And they will go back and speak to that person, have someone take the role of that person, assume that role, and there's a number of configurations which you'll see, and they let that go. And the other witnesses have all been there, and they support them in this and say, no, it's time, you can move on. Sometimes you have a relapse or stall. Relapse might mean, because trauma is a triggering thing, and every now and again, after the program, they may see or hear, like the triggers for trauma are things like sounds, smells actually. Some of them can't attend barbecues because, and then they come back until they've had treatment. Smell is a very fast neural indicator to trigger remembering of an event. So sounds, sights, and so they become very aware of how to be protective of that. So they don't put themselves in situations where they get triggered, but they learn how to manage triggers effectively. And then the recovery itself might be getting a sense that I want to live. Because remember, the risk for traumatized veterans is, as you know, suicide. The government of Canada and media always talk about the number of suicides by veterans. And these are people who don't get the treatment because they tend to, when they're traumatized, they tend to isolate and stay in basements and feel a lot of guilt. So bringing them into the group, which they're used to, brings them back to life that way. And then over here, post-VTP, there's a follow-up where they have new life skills, which they often will report, and their families will say, hey, my dad now talks to me. The kids say, Dad's now can play with us. He has a sense of humor, rather than Dad is isolating and being avoidant. And so the families have benefited, and we often hear from them. They thank us for the program. Their partners may say, we can't thank you enough for getting Dad back or my husband. So, but they help each other, they do it together, and then we eventually help them get into, if they need more work or career development. Now remember this, that this is Vanderkoop for those of you that study trauma. Trauma is not talked into us and cannot be talked out of us. So this is a method we are going to see is not a talking therapy as much as it is an action-based process therapy. Because the reason when we say trauma is talked into us, is not talked into us, is because when you experience a traumatic experience, it is enters through the midbrain, if you're doing neurology, and the midbrain hippocampus stores that right away as a flash. It's like they used to call a flashbulb memory. Flashbulb memory is all of a sudden you see something and it goes inside, doesn't go through this part of the brain, doesn't go through the cortex, it goes right in, and that's what activates people. So what we try to do is to get them to slowly unpack that so you can integrate the startle response with the thinking response, and then when they reenact it, they say, hey, I had no choice, that I couldn't save him, and I'm not a terrible person, and they use support from the other groups, and they can actually then say, I think I need to say goodbye, or I need to do something differently to address the respect of this person who was injured. Therapeutic enactment then is an experiential approach where it's more experiential, I mentioned that, rather than just talking. It's group-based, action-oriented. So what's important, because people are traumatized in a group, you have to kind of go slow, because if they get activated, they get into hyperarousal and they will dissociate from the experience. So you have breathing techniques, muscle relaxation, speaking more slowly. When you're ready, let's go again. So it's titrating the experience. You can investigate this if you want more detail on working with trauma through there's a reference series that you can check. I would say fear-inducing stimulus like traumatic incident is primarily a combination of a number of human resource processes, and the sensory motor processing of this incident is facilitated, meaning there's a lot of movement and physicality to calm and regulate the system and be able to integrate the emotions with the thoughts. Understanding the trauma, I think you probably are very aware of that. Core self meaning's affected. Some people who are in war zones will carry a meaning of, I came back, I couldn't do what I wanted to do, and because they're such high achievers, they will often feel depressed and guilty, whereas when they do the reenactment, that was replaced with, I did the best I could. In fact, with the other veterans present, they say you did more than can be expected, and that will affect them as well. So making meaning of the traumatic experience, or number 3, yeah, it happened, but now I understand it, and I can integrate it into my life and move on. If you think about World War II veterans, if your great-grandparents or grandparents, or in some cases people my age, the fathers of the group in their 90s now, would actually not ever retell the story again, or reenactment. And what did they do when they came back from World War II to Canada? What do you think the biggest risk was? How do they medicate? What's the best medication we have for veterans? Alcohol. And the Legion was a great provider of beer, right? And alcohol was used as a way to medicate. And so, but the problem with alcohol is that doesn't change the stimulus for why they needed to use it. So why actually dedicate this program to the 90-year-old, 85-year-old men and women from World War II that I met with before they died, and got them to tell their stories using the narrative of what they would have liked to have had when they came home. And they did tell their story then about their experiences that they couldn't share with their families. They shared them with their veterans. And when they were finished, they had noticed a kind of a revitalization of living, because the story no longer haunted them, and they felt relieved. They said when it was finished, it was so valuable, that they said, at Westwood, there's only one problem. Your program back then was 50 years too late. We should have had something to deal with the debriefing when we came home. So they gave me my marching orders and said, whatever you do, don't make them wait as long. So that's why this program started close to 20 years ago for the veterans from back now. And we see them within a few years, and Canada will be sending more peacekeepers out. So when they come back, they know about this. When they come back, they then seek out the kind of help they need, rather than carry it for 50 years at the very high risks. So I think now, in a nutshell, this program has an assessment period, and it's group building, and then do enactments, sharing, connection, and closure. They rebuild the group, and these groups will stay in touch with each other for months after, because they rebond again to a group sense that they had when they were overseas. But this time they rebond in a really healthy way about working hard to get healthy. And that's the schema you can see, the assessment, the preparation. It's very structured and group building. We build the group. And then we do the enactment. And then they reconnect and share their stories with each other, how each other's story affected them. And then they move towards what's called integrating self-reflection before they go back into the community. And that might mean sometimes speaking to their partners, their family members, and expressing to them that, look, as dad, I wasn't angry all the time. Basically, it goes out of control when I would get angry, or when I go away, wouldn't be in contact with you. And they got to teach them a little bit about my injury caused me to do this. It's nothing personal. I had no control over it, but now I'm connected. Now, this is Wayne's story, and I'm showing you Wayne's story because this is typical of what's called somebody who's had a trauma injury and at the beginning of the program. And what he did was, he is talking to us about what happened to him overseas. If I can get the words, let's see. No, don't like that one. Do you remember we had it done? It's very important to see it. But we had this going. Excuse us. Okay. Is it here? Maybe Clive can reactivate. There it is. Okay. Okay, this is Wayne, and this is when he came into the program. And you're going to see Wayne later. Be very patient. There we go. Question I'd say as you watch Wayne, notice the only time he looks at the camera, he looks at us, it's because he only looks up once, and you'll see why. Notice when he looks up.
My 3 colleagues hit an IED, and we were first on the scene, and the vehicle was on fire. We were told that there's still the driver was still trapped inside. So we tried going up, and then ammo started cooking off and coming towards us. So we basically just had to sit there and watch a friend burn to death and not be able to do anything. And I just remember thinking, like, we've got to do something. Like, we've got to do something, because it felt so horrible just to be standing there watching that. And like, instantly, like, I felt myself die. Like, that's when everything changed big time for me. So you just start using alcohol or drugs, and then you're getting drunk, and yeah, that's going along. That's great. It's doing what you want it to, and then it stops working after a while. That's when you start getting like rage. I have thought of committing suicide multiple times. I've almost done it.
So, when did he look up? When he thought of ending his life. And that was to get our attention. But otherwise, it's called the 1,000-yard stare, because he was carrying that. So, going through the program, he was able to unpack that process. So the next one you're going to see is the story of Dan, and then you'll come back and see Wayne in a moment. So Wayne did an enactment about what happened, why he was so traumatized. It was about his friend that had burned to death, and he couldn't save him. And his friend was calling for him they were together, but his commanding officer told him he couldn't go into the vehicle to save him because the vehicle had ammunition and explosives. So he had to stand by and witness that, and that took him to a place of great despair, to where he wanted to end his life because he couldn't save his friend. And so that's the haunting thing. So after the enactment, he was able to make sense of, because his friend in that enactment would talk back to him through simulation. So let's watch this. This is pretty straightforward. This is the program in action.
A program at the University of British Columbia offers soldiers a promising therapeutic approach because it allows those with invisible psychological injuries to release the underlying pain. Our cameras have been given unique access to this program, which is funded by the Royal Canadian Legion. It's developed and led by psychologists Dr. Marvin Westwood and Dr. David Kuhl.
Soldiers are warriors. They're trained to kill.
The therapy uses enactments of dark moments to help soldiers undo the wiring that military training has implanted in their brains. It also provides skills with which to move forward and learn to live again. Here they are working on a problem that affects so many. Tim has served in Afghanistan and now finds it hard to talk to his girlfriend. He asked director Judy Jackson to role-play her.
But they're my feelings,
But they are my feelings.
and I've learned to not shut down my feelings.
And I've learned not to shut down my feelings.
And I won't shut down my feelings with you,
And I won't shut down my feelings with
because
you.
when I shut them down, we both lose.
Because when I shut them down, we both lose.
Is that true?
Yeah.
So pause, just pause. Something is inside you right now. Stick with it. Just take it, just stay there.
Yeah. The course, it completely turns on its head the idea that men aren't supposed to feel. There's the acceptable emotions for a man, sort of anger. You can express that by fighting or by yelling, and that's about it. The rest of the emotions are kind of said to you in the military context again. That's your personal problem. Bottle that up inside. Don't go telling other people about it because you're weak if you do.
Okay, so a little bit of just history.
I was 17 when I left, you know. I got back from the war and I wasn't even 21 yet.
I understand that reconnecting family is a big issue, eh, Dan?
Absolutely.
This is about you and reconnecting with someone important in your family, isn't it? Yes, it is. So who is
I hardly ever go home. They want me to come home all the time. They want to talk to me all the time. I ignore their phone calls, their text messages, because it's just a sense of protection that you have for them. You know, you don't want them knowing your whole truth because you don't want it to affect them the way it's affected me. Probably
sculpture him.
Dan chooses a group member to role-play the father with whom he has been so distant, and his pal Wayne to act as his double.
Huh? Okay, come back. And when you see this, what do you see? Can you imagine why he wouldn't, after he was very connected with his father before service, but why he couldn't see his father when he came home? Any ideas? He stayed away because he couldn't speak to his father, couldn't see him. You know why that might happen? They're very connected before. Any ideas?
Shame.
Sorry?
Shame.
Because of what he experienced. And he felt that he couldn't look his dad in the eye because his dad knew him very well, and he feels very self-conscious about it. So he can't go home. He's out in BC, his family lives in Ontario. The father calls us, "Where is my son?" I can't see him, and so he came to this group to see what could happen and watch what happens. What's he doing?
like my dad's ready for me, but like I want to be ready, but
You can't right now.
I can't right now.
Finish this. Look at him. Say to him, Dan, if you stay there, look, he's looking at you.
Dan, if you stay there
Too long.
too long,
I'm afraid what will happen.
I'm afraid that my dad might give up, or I might give up, or
Yes.
the connection will be gone for
Sorry?
the connection might be gone for forever.
Forever. Your son's not coming back. What do you have to do?
I have to let him go. I have to let him die because I can't bear this pain anymore. My love for him will always be there. Dan, I need you to hear that. I want you to hear that before I turn around.
Sad.
Yeah,
He's not there.
he's not there.
And look at him, look at yourself, and what do you see there?
I'm still in the same position.
And alone. Right?
I've just been holding on to like so many things, and coming into the program, I was really intimidated. You know, first of all, opening up to men that I don't know, and secondly, you know, people judging me and you know what I've been through.
Dad doesn't have to do this himself. What could he say that's his truth, and yet not tarnish his dad's soul? Maybe the guys here can help you out.
When I came back, I wasn't okay.
Dad, I've taken lives.
Dad, I've taken lives. That's another one. What else?
Dad, when I came back, not all of me came back.
I don't care about people like I used to.
I don't care about people like I used to.
Dad, I've seen and done things that rest heavily on my soul.
The only people that can help me are the people that have been there, the people that know. I'm only here because of, you know, the other men that are like me.
So what do you think you'll say to him? Do you want to tell me now, or do you just want to come and do it?
Just say the truth.
Just say the truth, okay? Should we go?
You're by the lake. You hear the water.
You're fishing, you're casting.
Remember you told us a story about the wind. Can you feel the wind there? Yeah?
The sun on your face.
Who's on your right?
Dad.
So, Daniel, you're back. You're here. What's the worst thing you want to tell me? I'm ready to hear it.
What I need to tell you is that I'm sorry I've been distant from you. And I do love you. But all the shit that I went through, losing my value for human life, I didn't want you to see that in me.
Let it out. Let it out.
It probably kills me more knowing that we have this gap between us. But what I'm doing now is releasing my truth to you with hope that you don't carry it like I have. Because I am getting better. I feel a sense of relief and strength.
Of all the things you said, what's the thing you came out of your mouth? That's so important. You just told him.
It's the truth.
And you ended the what?
The gap. Distance.
And wasn't that why you came today? To know how to break the gap?
I lived with it for 4 years. And if someone would have told me that you don't have to live with it for as long as you think, then, you know, just have the trust, like it works. Even though it's painful, it's worth the struggle.
A big part of this program is about transition, and I think you've really exemplified how a soldier can transition back to life. It's very inspiring, I've seen you come so far, and you dropped your baggage, but you didn't stop there. Now you're actually you went to the next step. Let's start living again.
We are here for each other. We're here as a group of soldiers, and we know how to talk to each other, and we know how to listen. And there's soldiers out there that aren't in this group, that don't know about it.
We can't be quiet about the effects of war, of combat, of death any longer. And if there is going to be a change, this is part of it, and the public needs to hear the truth.
More programs like this need to be made available to greater numbers, because many do still suffer in silence. And if they fall through the cracks, there are other grim realities.
You might check in with yourself watching that, because you may have known people who were affected by events like this that they had no control. And it's kind of good sometimes to take a deep breath in before we go on. You breathe in, and then out. One more time. And out. Because this is their lives, this isn't an enacted thing. And the reason that they had this, Judy Jackson is a filmmaker, the reason they invited her in to see this, because they wanted to make public know of this program, which 1,000 people have now been through it, and also to dispel the myth that they are incapable of recovery. I think that comes through, does it? Do you understand the process now? Does it make sense? The enacted part? It does, doesn't it? So you see, they're moving, they stand in, they back each other, and that's what they would do in the field when they're working. So we're actually using their values of supporting each other, working hard to finish a mission, but switch that into the room for the therapeutic connection. And they would say at the end, this is the hardest work they've ever done, but it's good work. The results there's a lot of research done on this program, but generally what's very important is the suicidality is reduced because the depression goes from acute depression to mild or moderate. And if you bring depression rates down, you lower the risk of suicidality because of the correlation. The results are higher self-esteem, self-efficacy, greater intimacy and meaningful interpersonal experiences, and they acquire these skills of being more personal, family, employment-oriented. And so I was, if we just look at one other thing here. To go to the end, remember Wayne you saw at the beginning with the green shirt? He appears a year later with Judy Jackson, wanted to meet them a year after to see if the gains had remained, and they were in it, and that's Wayne, so she's asking him this.
Can I ask you that, Wayne? I see a big difference in you from when I first met you. Well, I see a big difference in you from when I first met you to the second time I met you, and a huger difference to now. And do you feel you've made a big journey from these?
Oh yeah, I've definitely made a journey like no other, that's for sure. Everything's different about my life now. Before I was isolated. I had a hard time just, I don't know, I was frozen, I didn't have a heart. But doing this program has helped me to unthaw and just become the person that I wanted to be.
Quite a difference a year later between him with the 1,000-yard stare. And then, last thing, I talked to him 2 weeks ago, and remember he wanted to end his life when he came, but at the end of his program he said the only thing he wanted to be able to do was hold a puppy and to feel again. And then guess what happened? there he is. Being one with his children, his son, his new daughter, and that was this summer. So he said, yeah, go ahead, show him the picture. So being a family man again, so that's it. I think that completes what I want to say because we have time for Q&A. And we don't want to be over time, do we? What time is it now? Maybe an hour?
It's 8:05.
8:05. Yeah, so question and answer. If you have any. Or maybe comments. Yes?
I noticed a lot of touch. A lot of
Yeah.
hands on backs.
Yeah.
So that's all I wanted to say.
No, she said she knows a lot of touch. And the guys in the group, they don't touch, they say they use contact. Remember, in working in this group, you have to think of the culture they come from, is that masculinity, that's one of the cultures. They say, oh, they use a lot of contact, but there is a lot of contact. But that's because the research in trauma, when people are traumatized, if you put a hand on the back, you get the hand on the back, you know, if you have a kid distressed, you grab and hold them, it calms the arousal system that's triggering the response. So yeah, they use contact a lot. They move around, right? And you do this and you do that. So it's a human touch, human contact. It is touch, of course, but they call it contact. The same as none of them cry in this group. You know, they don't call it. You know what they call it? They're releasing, which is actually very appropriate for them. You can see it, the cases of the grieving. The grieving is after, there's a term called good grief, right? Good grief is the failure to grieve is a problem, so they are very comfortable doing that. Because if they don't do that, then they're left with the haunted kind of images. Other comments? Yeah.
Just could you review the phase 3, the refocus and the reconnection?
Yeah.
Post the therapeutic enactment when you're doing re-entry?
Yes.
Event? Yes.
Okay. Re-entering, ideally, when the first 2 4-day events are doing the repair work, but the last 2 days are consolidating and projecting called SMART goals. They work together to prepare where you're going to go from here now to stay in the trauma recovery, what goal, what job acquisition, skills training you might want to take. They commit to stay in contact with each other. They have telephone trees, so they set up a schedule to follow each other up for a number of months, checking in, how's it going, you're achieving your goals. And so then they stand up and they practice the new skills they have, and they set up goals. And the big part of the last day is letting go of the group and saying goodbye. So they don't just leave; they have to say goodbye, to acknowledge and thank one another. So it's a re-entry. Really, it's kind of up and out. That's what they do. And we also check with them to make sure is there anybody else they might want to talk to if we didn't complete everything. And some of them may return for the second time. Yeah. So that's the re-entry. Does that make sense? Yeah. Other comments? Yeah.
Does it take time for them to kind of warm up to the idea of talking and sharing? Because we work with veterans doing personal to interpersonal therapy, and they're very private and very, they don't want to express what they've been through. They don't want to even talk to other vets, a lot of them.
No, that's right, and that's a good point. You saw at the beginning, it's not shown here because we started with Dan after the group had been built, but the storytelling and the life review is where they build the group, and then we actually have paraprofessionals who've done the program before. They come in and they actually model being more personal, more disclosing, but because they are soldiers themselves, the others catch on right away. Oh, okay, so I can talk here, it feels safe. And because there are no records going to the Department of Defense or Veteran Affairs, they actually become quite self-disclosing, but you build a group first. Sometimes with the therapists, like in the VA Veteran Affairs, who are civilians, they may consider, they don't open up to many civilians because they don't want to re-traumatize you. And so you have to actually we train people how to approach them when they come in and give them permission to be as direct as they need to, and that helps, but it's easier in a group. But one-on-one, if you're very attuned to that, say take your time, don't start talking to them about their injuries, talk to them about what they did in their life before they entered the military, how did they get in there, what are some of the competencies and skills they brought, what did they learn, and they start talking that way.
Yeah, well, they open up to us
Yeah.
in therapy one-on-one, but I try to picture some of my guys
Yeah.
in that situation, and
No, yeah, that's why the group, that's why we don't, when they come in, they don't talk right away. They actually write a life review, and then they read it, and then they talk. That's why we do it. Yeah, because in groups, they'd be more intimidated. And unlike the trauma groups in hospitals, they can go into mixed trauma groups, but they won't speak there because they say, well, my injury isn't as important as yours, so we don't speak up. So that's why they only are with people that have been there, sort of in their mind. Yeah. Well, that's good. You're having success. And the public awareness, what they want to do this for, and when we show this, some veterans will see this. We often present this to military audience. They'll sign up after because they see the film, and they see Wayne and Dan, and they say, oh, I can do that. So it's for public awareness here.
So I'm wondering, when you're modeling a conversation with someone else,
Yes.
and they're getting the opportunity to enact it,
Yeah.
and then they go home,
Yes.
and then they're shut down.
When they go home, we actually prepare them for the transition home. Like we encourage them not to talk about what they did in the group, because sometimes the partners say, what did you do, what did you do? But if you get them talking about that too much, it will interfere with the therapeutic correction. So we prepare them when they go home that it's a different culture, a different world, and then we give them skills and strategies how to talk to, ask their kids questions, talk to their mother and their children differently, and all of a sudden they will say, hey, my husband actually talks. He actually is talking about himself now. He knows how to ask me questions, and they practice that. So, yeah, otherwise it could have diminishing effects. But remember, they stay 4 days. They're from 8 to 10, so they really get very practiced in it. Yeah. Comments? Yeah.
Two big things stand out to me. Witnessing.
Sorry?
Witnessing.
Witnessing, yeah.
Seems to be a very big.
It is.
And allowing them to unburden.
Yes.
I can have that witnessed. We do therapy that's kind of similar to
Yes.
that. But what we find sometimes is that we're going deeper. So sometimes what we're discovering is that there's pre-existing trauma before they enter.
Oh, okay.
And so this becomes a little bit more complex.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering what that
So,
looks like out there.
That's a very good question.
Yeah.
Because the trust, every time they do an enactment, there's 6 or 8. And every time they do it, the trust level increases. Like if you look at inclusion, control, and trust range. They will actually say, well, now that I dropped the baggage, what happened in Afghanistan, I was also traumatized as a child. So they could have been physically or sexually abused. But by that time, they would say, I want to drop that too. They're not self-conscious about that at all, because an injury is an injury. And then they connect it to my post-military trauma was intensified by the fact that I was bullied or shamed as a child. And that's why some of them, when they finish the program, some of them go into programs like clinical counseling, social work, because they have a better understanding. Yeah, they do connect it. So early experiences of trauma. Because they remember, they see dealing with this as a real challenge. They're quite competitive. But my trauma is worse than yours, so I'll go first. It's just a really good thing, because they're competitive to say, I will go and show you. I can show you how to do this, because if someone's shy, well, I'll go first, because they always put themselves second for others. That's part of their culture. But the group is very strong by that time. Yeah. That's very great. Go ahead.
How can we refer people to the program?
You can actually call one of the New Brunswick person. I have his name in my room. He's the contact person here. If you have somebody that you know would like to be referred, if there's about 6 veterans, you can call him. I can get that number to you. And then you can just call him and say, or you can just contact the director of the Veterans Transition Network, is a website, and make a referral. They have a brother, family member, client, and they'll say, where are you calling from? You're from Brunswick? Well, there's a program here in May, there's one now, there might be another one, so that's how we do it.
I have another question. Is there training?
Sorry?
Is there training to
Yes.
learn this modality?
Is there training on how to do this?
Yeah.
Yeah, are you interested?
Probably, yeah.
Good. Yes, there is. That's out of our center is trained clinicians in this particular approach.
Where is the training offered? Or?
The training is offered in, there's sometimes in Eastern Canada, and most of it's in BC, but they did a training out here for clinicians. But that's all changing. There's going to be 5 levels of training now, like the modules, because they're getting more skilled. But yeah, if you should also just, when you contact, if you want to call the Veterans Transition Network and say, no, I'm interested in making a referral, but you're interested in where training is, they'll send you, they'll put you in touch with Tim Lager, who's actually, he's the director of this, executive director of the center, and he's in the film. Yeah, that's good. You might like it. It's very gratifying. We always work with 2 clinicians. There's always 2 of us. And then paraprofessionals, 2 paras, 4 of the team. And they do most of they help each other a lot, so it's quite easy to do. Yeah?
I've been wondering if because you're male,
Yeah.
it makes a difference with the male veterans because you are yourself not afraid of your feelings or expressions.
Yeah, it does help to model it, absolutely. When we have women run the women's program and the men run the men's program, because if we sometimes what happens is if a woman is leading the program, they will kind of act out, and try to be, well, they don't want to hurt her feelings by telling the story, so they shut down. And it's that overprotective thing. But some women were very effective with the men because they understand them very well, and they'll know that right away. Every now and again we have, there's a process at the end where they do video analysis of their work, and my colleague Marvin Westwood, they really trust her, they work with her because she meets with them after, and they're very at home with that. But normally we try to keep them separately, but we also as leaders have to model our own emotions to them. And I've been in the business, they know me, so they would say, yeah, he's a good guy, and we would come. Yeah. Yeah. No, the gender thing is important because that's why you can't mix the men and women in the group, because some of the women have had sexual traumas in the military because they're serving with the regular forces. So you're coming for trauma, but an incident in Afghanistan, they could have had a trauma injury just being at Gagetown or in a service, or so you have to be mindful of that. And the forces are trying to deal with that now. But the big thing is, from my point of view, this affects families. Some of these, mostly men, and some of the women, but mostly men, those kids have fathers now. Because if they take their life, and you have suicide, what does suicide do to the family? What's it do? Yeah. Suicide's a kind of double homicide. There's still shame associated, so the kids not only lose a primary parent, whether their marriage is together or not. Often you have divorces, but the kids now have a father and a mom. But it's so tragic that I know so many of them, when they came in, were going to end their lives. So they now have their families, their kids are growing. And that's such a wonderful investment. Because they did serve for the country, and we voted in the Parliament to send them. Right? So I feel we should do it. And a lot of people do it, are helping out. But to me, it's the big thing of, not ending your life. We don't say commit. You know why we don't use the word commit suicide? You know why? You know. We don't say commit suicide, do we? You know why? We say they ended their lives, or they may have suicided, but they don't say commit. Do you know why we don't say commit? What's commit suggest? Crime. That you committed a crime. Commit suicide. So that the language is quite changing, because they're just in a lot of pain. and left untreated.
Marv?
Yeah.
First of all, thank you for your presentation.
Yes.
Really, really interesting. Can you say more about the soul injury?
Oh, yeah. This is Richard. Richard's our visitor from our neighboring country to the south, which is getting so much attention.
We will leave that out, Marv.
What?
We'll leave that out.
Well, you also have another country you came from, the Caribbean. But he's talking about soul injury, and there's a film I'm probably showing tomorrow by one of the veterans who recovered from a soul injury. You know what a soul injury is? Soul injury is where the trauma is, in the military, people sometimes do things they ought not to do. They violated their own morality. Well, I'll give you a couple of examples. The fellow that is in the video, under extreme attack, he was a signalman, and he ordered one of the people, the scouts in the field, to be killed because he assumed, he was told that's a Taliban. And so he ordered them, killed him. What it was is he ordered, that person actually was with the Canadian forces as underground intelligence, and he was the one that gave the order. There was hell breaking loose, and he said, yes, eliminate him. And as a result, he died and put the company at risk, and he was a highly functioning soldier, and he wanted to die after because he did a terrible thing, and therefore that's a soul injury. And he was haunted by 7 years until he came to the program, and now we did in the kind of work you saw, but it was a soul injury recovery. It's a bit different than the trauma injuries about a death or not being able to be with his father. We use a particular kind of sculpture to do that. But it's very, very important that you remember under extreme conditions, people will do things they ought not to have done. So they judge themselves. To me, I think they're very moral people when they came back. I killed that kid. I should never have done that. But I had no choice because, you know, the kid is, sometimes the enemy would put a kid out on the road loaded with ammo, and the vehicles come by, if they stop to protect the kid, they could be attacked from the other side, so they choose to go through, and the kid dies, and then they go home, and they have an 8-year-old, and they can't be in the house anymore. Because they come back to Canada as a very civilized society, and it's a terrible thing when they have that, because basically they just think they shouldn't live anymore, because they've got quite high standards. And so every now and again we get those, and you and I share that interest. And so it's called the soul injury. Core self is quite surprising in a secular society. The soldiers like to call it a soul injury. They say it's soul deadening work. So but the approach is a little different. And chaplains in the military chaplains can be helpful, but it's not about forgiveness in the usual sense. They will recreate the whole thing and understand with others present how that happened. But as one guy said, people want to say a bunch of forgiveness. I say I take full responsibility, but I understand why I did it. Now I'm not a terrible person, and but don't deny it. Don't take that away from me, because it was kind of sacred. The recovery is. Yeah, soul injury. It's much more research now. Yeah.
Do you differentiate between moral injury and soul injury?
More, yeah. That's it. Yeah. Moral injury is if you're serving and you know that the company you're in is taking money from some locals and they're behaving badly, or the commander that you have to report to is incompetent and sends people out at risk, and you know one of your friends is sent out at risk. Those are the moral injuries relate to either the company or an individual doing something that's really wrong, and they themselves had no choice, but they went along with it. And say they're selling water, they charge water because their officers say, no, they have to pay for it, but of course, these are people in the desert. That would be a moral injury. Soul injury is that you've done something that is so terrible that your own conscience haunts you about it. And the soldiers are very clear, like when you talk to me, be very careful when you're talking to me about the injury, whether it's moral. I know what a moral injury is, I know what a kinetic injury is, and a soul injury, because if you don't talk to me carefully about this, I may never get out of this. It's, I don't know if that helps distinguish it, but the way that we define it is they don't feel they should live. They've done such a terrible thing. The body itself, whereas moral injury, they behaved in a moral way. That's it. You know? And those are moral injuries too. Like the feeding stations, if you work in humanitarian aid abroad, my wife worked in ICRC, and she got overseas, and they did feeding stations. They did feed the kids who were all feminized, and then when they got to a certain weight, they cut them off because they had gained enough weight that they would live. So they had to refuse food to them, and they would walk for miles across the plains of Africa because the feeding station would feed them. And they'd say, we can't feed you anymore because you gained the kilogram of us. That was a moral injury because she's changed the nurse. You don't turn people away. By Canadian standards, they're malnutrition. But others were desperately in need of food, so you say, you can eat, but you can't. And if you do that too much, you understand? Yeah.
Do they ever intersect? So it sounds
Yes,
like,
they do.
okay, so like Wayne's experience, it
Yeah.
sounds as much as it, you don't define it as a soul
But I
injury.
think it was a soul injury.
Okay.
I think Wayne, that's why you watch very carefully. Why do you think it was a soul injury? Why did you feel Wayne covered a soul injury? That was his buddy. And his buddy was calling, come and help me. Because he did have a choice of risking discipline by his commanding. He could have run in and he pulled him out. Couldn't he? And then been kicked out of his command. But if he violates the commanding officer, he no longer can serve. And the fellow was calling for him. Help me, help me. And there was nothing to stop him from going in, except there was ammo in the back. So I think you're right. I think it was a soul injury. Because remember, his goal was, we said, why are you here? And he said, if I get over this, I just want to be able to hold a puppy. He actually said, I just want to be able to hold a puppy and cry. There's no emotions. But you've got kids waking up now in the middle of the night. There's lots of emotion in that household, right? Yeah. The comments.
I think going off of that comment, what do you say for Wayne? Maybe it was a combination of moral
It's both.
and soul injury.
Yeah. Yeah, it was. So, just to give you this one, so you know, with the case of Wayne, which isn't a film, he wouldn't mind me saying it because I talked to him. When he reenacted the lab burning, right, and his friend was put in there, he picked someone to be his friend, and they're very good at putting tables in together, and this is the vehicle, and he's in there, and they recreated the scene from that day so he could see it again, go back, and his friend was still alive, and so we would interrupt the process, and he would say what he needed to say, and then he would switch. He had a double, and then he would go in and he'd be the guy in the lab speaking back to his double himself, and so he himself said, if you come in, we could both die, and I'm going to die. This is how they would narrate it. I'm going to die. Don't you come too, because then my death is in vain. That's the therapeutic correction. Because he switches roles. It's called role reversal. And he never had that insight before. Because that guy probably thought that thing. I'm yelling and screaming in pain, come and get me, but he doesn't want to come in. So I imagine. Comments, other questions? Okay. Thank you. Oh, yes, go ahead.
Just a quick question, just to follow up around the soul injury. I know being a father of two boys, right now in the military, soon to be an officer, I was really struck by, when you did the role play, and the question was, what is the worst thing you want to tell me as a father? And watching it as a father was really powerful. And it made me think about some of my own work around men and resiliency and reading about that and around wondering, have you noticed with the men that you work with, the men that have had conversations or narratives around their relationships with their fathers prior to all of this, is there any difference between, maybe it's obvious, I'm just asking a question, did you notice the difference between the men that were able to respond, maybe not quicker, I don't know if that's not a good word, but had a difference in the response versus they didn't have a connection at all? I can imagine, I know my own work, some men that I work with have a good relationship and it's open, other men don't. Do you notice a difference?
Yes.
And then I'm thinking as a follow-up to that, around prevention and looking at the military, is this kind of model looking at any prevention things to look at helping them with their narratives and starting that younger and talking about?
Yes, it is. But the first thing is, remember, a lot of them have been raised into the military for the symbolic father. They don't have fathers. So the military represented the metaphor, the father, which actually will betray you, ultimately. Because that's not a good, military regime isn't a good father. Therefore, it's a double betrayal sometimes. Because they go there thinking, I need connection from the fathers, metaphorically, and then they're betrayed in their way, whatever happens. They get injured, and so they've been let down again. And so that has a bigger effect in the therapeutic correction. The ones that have good relationships with their fathers, actually, they are much more resilient in terms of when they have an injury. But this Dan, so you know, his injury, there was another injury he dealt with, which is not this one. The loss of his father was so excruciatingly painful because he had a very good relationship that he took that space to deal with that, and as a result of that enactment, after that he made contact with his father right away, and he's moved back to him with the family. But prevention, when we show this film with the military and family units, they actually are taught how to talk to their kids differently, especially teenage boys. They don't glamorize war. This is what happened, and we just have to stay in touch. You may choose to go, but these are the risks, and they talk much more openly now when they see this. Yeah, it's challenging. Yes?
Yes, well, I've been asked to offer thanks this evening, and first of all, I would like to, on behalf of the Center for Interdisciplinary Research on Narrative, say thank you to the audience members who've come out this evening and who've engaged so readily in this conversation. And we invite you to come back tomorrow in Brian Mulroney Hall at the Center to continue the conversation that going between 10 and 2. But especially thank you very much to you, Dr. Westwood, for sharing your expertise with us this evening at the John McKendy Memorial Lecture on Narrative. In sharing your research story with us tonight, you really have enriched our understanding of the important work that's achieved through the group-based trauma repair approach, and you've shown us the power and potential of enacted narrative. We do have a small token of our appreciation. We ask you to accept it with our sincere thanks, and we wish everyone a safe journey home today. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The last thing I would say, many of the veterans come from New Brunswick in the Canadian history, and so it's an honor to be in Fredericton, near Gagetown, to present this to you, because chances are you know people either professionally or in your